All right, we're talking Kansas City Chiefs, who were not able to protect Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl loss against the Bucs. Part of it was that great Tampa pass rush, but a lot of it was on the Chiefs up front. The main focus in free agency was along that offensive line. They made some signings. Thuney, Long, Remmers, couple of guards and a tackle. They're also going to get back a couple of guys who opted out last season, like Duvernay-Tardif and Lucas Niang. So let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs heading into the draft. The Chiefs War Room. Got the band back together. I'm Chris Hassel with Brady, Quinn, and Pete Prisco. Brady, when you look at what the Chiefs needed to have in the Super Bowl and what they've done so far in free agency, what would you say they've done?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. And the offensive line issues, I tend to think they get overblown because of the injuries that they sustained. That was part of the issue with what was going on there. So in order for this team to get back to the Super Bowl, I think that one of the biggest things was their defense has to step up to the plate. They've got some stars. There's no doubt about it. Chris Jones is one of the best interior defensive players, Tyrann Mathieu in their secondary. But when you take away those two, you kind of look at the other guys and you go, there's some mismatches we can take advantage of. So to me, outside of offensive line depth, only because, you don't know how Niang and Laurent Duvernay-Tardif will come back after sitting out for a year. And so you need some depth there on the offensive line. Add some guys potentially to be the future for some of the older veteran players like a Mike Remmers, who you could probably upgrade from there. You need to help out on defense. And in particular, I do think you really could pick at any level. It could be defensive front, linebacker, secondary. You really could upgrade at all three of those spots on defense. So that should be their singular focus moving forward.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Brady. I think defensively, the big lack of pass rush showed up in the Super Bowl as well. Everybody wants to focus on what the Bucs did to them in terms of a defensive line attacking the quarterback. But on the other side of the ball, they didn't really influence Tom Brady much at all. And I think Frank Clark had an off year, wasn't the same player. And I think they need to add some pass rush help in a big way. Try and influence the quarterback. That's important. We know that. Also, you mentioned all levels. I think getting Willie Gay back will be good for them. Remember, he missed the Super Bowl. He played well when he played. He'll be back in at linebacker. Corner, you need an upgrade there as well. But I also think they need a left tackle. We look at their line. Yeah, they made some moves in free agency. They're getting some guys back. But they don't have a true left tackle. And I just think they need to find a way in this draft to get a guy they can plug in there and play and start at left tackle.
Draft is 3 weeks from Thursday. Kansas City drafting second to last in the first round, number 31 overall. Heading into the draft, Brady, you said they have needs at pretty much every level defensively, but is edge on top of the list?
Well, I think it really comes down to best player available at one of two spots. Either a tackle, as Peter just pointed out, or edge. Whoever is there that you like, you have the highest grade on, that's what you need to go with. This is not a deep draft for edge players. It is for tackles, and that's why if you have the player there for an edge defender, whether it's Ojulari, Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia, if you think he's big enough to be able to hold the anchor on the edge, he would be a potential prospect you look at there. Greg Rousseau, he'd be another player out of Miami, opted out this past year, but a couple years ago had a phenomenal year, and he has a ton of upside to him. Still a very young player, and a young player playing the defensive end position. So there's a number of players and spots that you could go with. I would say best available, though, between one of those two spots.
Well, I agree with you, Brady. I think 100%. I think it's edge and left tackle, and particularly edge. And you mentioned this is a no-star edge players. You won't see any go in the top 10, which means, or likely not go in the top 10, which means they'll get dropped down. There'll be some guys there that will help them. Maybe a Greg Rousseau falls down to that spot from Miami, or you mentioned Jalen Phillips, the other Miami guy. I think they're all in play there as edge rushers to help that defense. And again, if you can't rush the quarterback consistently in the NFL, I don't care how good your team is. And a lot of their games, they play with the lead. They should be able to rush the passer better than they did. So that's the #1 priority. Come back in the second round and get a left tackle.
Okay, Ryan Wilson has him taking Greg Rousseau at number 31 overall in his latest 2-round mock draft. And then in the second round has him taking a cornerback out of Syracuse, Afitu Melifonwu. So what are their options, in your opinion, in the draft? You said tackle, there's edge. Ryan has him going cornerback. What do you think they should do?
No, if they ended up with those two players, I think that'd be a pretty solid draft for them thus far. Getting a cornerback, which I definitely do think is a need, something that they're going to need some help with. But also an edge player that I think is still developing, but somebody can help out Frank Clark, maximizing his abilities. But outside of that, I think Joe Tryon's another edge player that I would look at that spot potentially. If you don't take Russo in the first round, maybe a second-round prospect or third round that would possibly be there. Tyson Campbell's another cornerback out of Georgia that I really like that could potentially be a good fit for their scheme and still be there. And the other position player, Pete talked about Willie Gay coming back, but I still think outside of Willie Gay, they could upgrade at linebackers. So, maybe later rounds, a guy like Cameron McGrone out of Michigan, he'd be a player that I really like. I think he runs the football well. Definitely was the quarterback of that defense there for Michigan. So that'd be a player that I think they could get in late rounds that could actually be a contributor on that defense.
Pete?
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of those guys, Brady, but I think you got to look at it. And Brady made the good point. If they go defense in the first round, then you come back in the second round, you grab a tackle. But you probably will go tackle in the first round, I think. I think they'll go tackle the first round and come back, get a defensive player. And some of those, tackles that are possibilities if they don't take one in the first round, or Spencer Brown out of Northern Iowa is a big, tall, lanky guy, could fit in there and maybe hold up at left tackle right away. He could be a down-the-road kind of guy. But if you go tackle first, then edge, Rashad Weaver out of Pittsburgh, intriguing pass rusher who I think is going to be a good NFL player and a guy who could fit in there and situationally maybe right away, but eventually he could be a starting defensive end. Taron Jackson, remember, everybody talks about Coastal Carolina against BYU, and he was very good in that game rushing Zach Wilson. So he's another down-the-line kind of guy who can help the pass rush, but it's definitely pass rush and left tackle.
Well, let's see. They've got the 31st overall pick. Then they have 62. When you look at the teams in the NFL, and I know a lot of teams haven't spent a lot of money, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers kind of held firm. They brought back a lot of their guys. If the Chiefs don't make a huge splash here, are they still the favorites, in your opinion, to win the Super Bowl?
That's a tough question to answer because they have Patrick Mahomes, so you'd think that they would be. And I don't think they have to make a big splash in this year's draft in order to be the favorite. I just think they have to have a draft that adds on some of the pieces out around him. He can only do so much. We saw that in the Super Bowl. So between the offensive line additions that they made, and by the way, we should also look at the fact that they could trade out of this spot. Like that could be where the splash or where the value is for them, is they could trade out of this, give it to someone else who wants to trade up, potentially take a quarterback that's falling, and then you're accumulating more draft picks to add on to this, or it gives you the ability to move up from 62, somewhere up a little bit higher, potentially in the second round, to go along with the compensation you're getting with that other trading back second round pick you're going to be picking with. So there's also that thought where they could get a number of good players from that first round pick, but they're still the Super Bowl favorites in my mind. But with everyone coming back from Tampa, I would say it's about that close. It's that close only because how those two teams, I think, match up.
Yeah, it's close, but let's think about this for a second. If Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz play in the Super Bowl, do the Chiefs win the game? And the answer to that question, probably. So, because he was influenced by the pass rush in a big way in that game. It was the difference in the game. So, I still think they're the favorite. As long as Patrick Mahomes is slinging it around, they're the favorite in my mind. They do have to shore some things up. They have to be better on defense, and the offensive line has to hold up. But they're still going to score a ton of points. And we still haven't seen the best of the running back from Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who they drafted last year. Remember, he got banged up a little bit. He wasn't the same player in the second half of the season. So, I do think they're the team to beat, particularly in the AFC, and probably the team to beat in all of the NFL.
All right, that's a look at the war room for the Kansas City Chiefs, who are looking to get back on top heading into next season, drafting 31st overall. They are 5-1 to win the Super Bowl. Favorites in the AFC plus 250. Huge favorites in the AFC West. Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.